When we're working with fear and dread, a lot of it is about being accurate and not fooling ourselves because we can't really fool ourselves. We know that life is not safe. We know that lots of things that will happen are out of our control. And we also have all of these beliefs about life that we form through our direct experience. Fear is present moment threat. Anxiety and dread are predictions of threat in the future. And dread tends to intensify as we get closer to the time. So if we're thinking about something we're doing tomorrow, that feels a little closer than something we're going to do 2 months from now. When we're working with fear and dread, a lot of this is our neuroception, our perception of, am I safe? What's here that's threatening? What degree is it? How threatening is it? And we've all had bad things happen to us that we couldn't control. And we've all seen bad things happen to other people as well. And we've probably all had our trauma minimized. Oh, you're just exaggerating. You're always such a drama queen. That's not going to happen. We might do it to ourselves, and often other people do it to us too. So, what we do know is that it doesn't help to try to talk ourselves out of feeling dread or anxiety. And fear is something that's happening in the moment. So, it's happening in our unconscious, not in the verbal or conscious level of the mind. That's part of why it doesn't help to try and talk ourselves out of it. However, it is helpful to work with worst case scenario thinking. So we feel fear in our body, and then our nervous system is like, red alert, something's going on. We need to be prepared for it. And it floods us with all the adrenaline, the cortisol, and the thoughts that it thinks we might find helpful in protecting ourselves. This is literally a brain issue. If you think about all the millennia that we evolved and our brain evolved, all of the threats we saw were immediate. Anything we could see from our eyes was in our immediate vicinity. And they talk about the first war that was televised was the Vietnam War. Before that, we knew about it, we'd heard about it, we might have written or read letters about it, but we didn't see it happening. So our ancestors' brains developed to respond to images of threat as though it's an immediate danger. So now, and especially with social media and 24-hour news channels, we see the intensity of threat and trauma and other people that are in such horrible circumstances. We see videos of it, we see pictures of it, and it affects our brain. We look at a picture and we're alarmed on some level. That could happen to me. And a video image, a series of images like that on video are much more alarming than a still image. So our mind is set up to react seriously to images of threat. And then we feel powerless, partly because the events in the world are so big and we know that there's nothing we can do about it. And we know that there's danger. So if we look at climate change, for instance, we might all have a feeling of, well, I could have been doing more. Maybe I shouldn't be driving into town all the time. I shouldn't have taken so many vacations. We can see how we might feel guilty, but we also feel powerless. Like, well, I'm only one person. Even if I do my best, not everybody else is. And what about those people that are taking corporate jets? And we have all of this going on in our mind about danger. And we're not fooling ourselves. We know that there's risk and danger here. Last week, we worked with driving anxiety, but fear of flying is also another one. So when we see an image like this, where there's a plane on fire, or we might have an image in our mind about crashing on the ocean or something, we need to do something to let our brain know that these images are not real. So a couple of the ways that we work with fearful thoughts is we don't make fun of them. We don't try and pretend they're not there. With our eyes open, we put the thoughts, whether they're words or images, into a frame, them on the wall on the other side of the room. And then look and see there's the image, there's the frame, and then there's a space on the outside of the frame. So take your eyes around, and you could imagine that whatever you want in that frame. But take your eyes around the empty space a couple of times. Let's do that now together. So go in one direction around the empty space and then the other. And then look back into the frame. You could also tap on your forehead as you're looking at that image. You can imagine that the image is in watercolor paint and it's raining, so the image is gradually disappearing. There are a lot of different ways to help our nervous system know, actually, that image isn't something that's happening right now to me. When we take our eyes around the outside and a couple of times in each direction, we're stimulating the brain in a certain way that also helps us to realize that what we're looking at is not actually happening. And then the other thing that happens, and we'll go into this more in the inquiry, is that we have sensation and feelings in our body. Traumatic memory and traumatic projection takes us into the past or the future. What we want to do is be present here in this moment. In this moment, we're not back in the past where there was danger, and we're not in the future. We're right here. So the more we can stay grounded in the present moment, the more we will have accurate neuroception. We'll be able to tell, yes, this is an immediate threat. One of the ways that that happens is our body signals us. It signals us not with words, but with sensations, energies. So if we have images, we work with that, images of a sensation. But also we work with, where is the sensation? And how can I describe it? How can I take that step back in my perspective so that I notice I'm feeling a sensation? If it gets too intense, I can notice the space around the energy. I could hold my own hands. I could stay grounded in this present moment. So these are tools that we can become very proficient at. One of the things we know about the nervous system is that it bases its projection of threat on the evidence from the past. So this child here looks well cared for. And that child's brain would be developing the experience of feeling safe. A lot of the neural networks in the brain would be developing for connection. So a child who doesn't have that experience would not be having the neural development, the brain development. It has an effect. It's practical. How we're treated, the experiences that we have are what develops our brain. So we know that when children don't feel reliably safe, they can't reliably predict that they're going to be safe. That causes a lot of the momentum around fear and dread. So if you get somebody who's quite anxious or experiences a lot of fear and dread, there's some reason for it. And the reason for it is our past experience. So we know that when we can't predict that our body's going to be safe, we don't sleep well. So if that's a child, then they don't perform well in school because they're exhausted. They have trouble trusting people, or they trust the wrong people because they're so desperate. So our neuroception is off. We don't even have the brain development at that age when we're a child to really have our full capacity yet. And we do have a nervous system that remembers everything that's ever happened. So if that was your experience, you know that in your bones, if you couldn't predict safety of your body as you slept. So there might have been some kind of mental illness, violence, addiction, something going on with one or both of the adults or more of the adults in your environment. And if that was your experience, it's hard to argue with experience. So you might have every morning woken up, I don't know what's going to happen today. And even if you had safety of your body in your home, which I did, as I got a little bit later into my childhood, into my early teens, I did not have safety in my social environment. So I was not certain, and this is very common with children who are shamed or bullied or ostracized. We don't know what's going to happen that day, but we can predict, and because of the negativity bias, we will likely predict that something bad's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen today, it's going to happen soon. So we have to stay alert. So let's pause here for a moment. Take a couple of breaths, just a couple of intentional breaths can bring us back away from thinking about that and maybe feeling that in your body into the safety of this moment in time. We're looking into the historical roots of fear, anxiety, and dread. And whatever your experience was as a child, it probably wasn't perfectly safe. I don't know that there's any such thing really. You might have had good enough safety in some of the elements of your childhood and not in others. If you want to read more about that, I have a link here to adverse childhood experiences where we can have a look and see what are the things that cause children to be anxious and afraid. And some of them are things that we would all think about, and some of them are a little bit more subtle, like not being seen emotionally, not being connected with, leads us to feeling like we're on our own. Let's sit back now and really work with what can help us to ease that feeling. So we know that minimizing our situations and pretending danger doesn't exist doesn't work. We live in a world that's unpredictable. We live in bodies that are vulnerable. We have social and emotional needs that are not certain to be met. We have a lot of agency, a lot of ways that we can work with this. And in the bottom line, we're all going to die. We don't know when. We all want to avoid pain and suffering. Trying to talk ourselves out of it doesn't work. Regulating into the safety of this moment doesn't work exactly in terms of, oh, yeah, I feel perfectly safe now. It does help us to lower the level of alarm, though. When we're in a fight, flight, freeze response, we can come back into a feeling of more regulation. We don't have to be in those survival modes. One of the ways that we might do that is to band together with others. So it might be that in the Sunday community class that we talk with each other. We do inquiry and then we connect with each other. It might be that you get engaged in some kind of social action. It might be that people at work develop a close friendship circle, and so that you can take action in terms of feeling more connected there. Take a moment to think about and to bring forward, is there anything in your life right now that's particularly helpful? Maybe you've learned to really challenge catastrophic thinking, and that's not as prevalent in your mind anymore. What is particularly helpful right now? And a flight response is really common, and that's about minimizing it, pretending danger doesn't exist, pretending things aren't the way they are. And we all know that that's not fully satisfying either. So when you think about the kinds of things you worry about, notice what comes to mind. And as you're doing that, soften your forehead and eyebrows. What are some of the flavors of this for you? Is it specifics? Will that teacher bully me again today? Will that certain person? Is it more of a gut sense? I feel it in my bones. I know something bad is coming. And it's a generalized anxiety. It's not specific to a person. What is it that you worry about? And as you bring those worries forward, notice your body, let yourself breathe. And it might be that you've seen images of homes in California with all the rain falling into the ocean, or you've seen images of flooding. It might be something very specific. Notice where in your body, what's it like in your body when you worry, when you bring to mind whatever the images are. And whenever you feel that you're starting to go too intensely into the past or into the future, bring yourself back into this moment. So it's a balance here of I'm bringing forward the worries, something really specific, and I'm also noticing what does it feel like in my body? Can I hold my own hands, which would help to stay grounded? You could look around the room, notice the cues of safety. You could put the images into a frame. You could do tapping on your forehead, bring your attention into your body again, the sound and sensation of the tapping. I'm going to stay with this inquiry for a couple of minutes. You're always welcome to come out of it. Often really helpful to keep your eyes open. You can have your gaze soft or kind of off to one side. But whenever you feel that you're being too drawn into the worry, the past, or the future, open your eyes again, ground, and orient to this moment. Take a few breaths. And notice the experience of going into some kind of worry about the future. So it could be a real worst case scenario stream of thought. Well, if I see that person, what if they say this? Or what if this happens? Oh, yeah, and then it's going to, and then you could be going into quite a stream of thought about it. So if that's the case, you could pull back into your body. Notice, oh, wow, look at that. I went from here to here to here. I'm really worried about that. This is a somatic mindfulness inquiry. We're paying attention in our body and to our thoughts. And then notice how accurate your perception is. We're not discounting our past experience, either our past experience or somebody else. We're validating it. We're saying, okay, where is this thought coming from? It starts here, it goes to here, to here, to here. And now here I am, and I'm alarmed about something. How much of a risk is it? So take a step back from the actual events that you're thinking about or the worry that you're thinking about. One of the questions here is, will my home be flooded? So if you're in the middle of a rainstorm and you've had a lot of rains and you're really close to somewhere where flooding has occurred, it would be silly to sit in your house and go, well, that's just a fear. That's just anxiety. Sometimes we need to do things about something. Oftentimes we do. So we're not discounting the evidence. And we're also looking to see, okay, I've had a lot of bad things happen in my life. And this familiar feeling is dread. It's associated with something bad's going to happen. I know it in my bones. I know it in my gut. And it's related to past experience. It's not necessarily accurate right now. When we know about the power of the nervous system to remember and alarm ourselves with things in the past that could be dangerous now or in the future, it helps us to realize I could look at this more closely. Is this true? And how do I know it's true? And then work with those images as well. So we always know these things could happen. We're not trying to pretend, and we're not helpless now in the way that we were as a child. As an adult, we have access to different kinds of security. We can bring ourselves out of relationships that are harmful. We could get a job, we could move out, we could do some things, we could speak up for ourselves. Just for a moment, imagine that. We live in this difficult time, and we have all of this skill and wholeheartedness that we could bring to what's here right now. So imagine yourself bringing in some resources. When we're worrying, we're not thinking about the resources that we have. So let's set this worry aside for a moment. Bring in a kindness to yourself, might be a resource. It might be someone you love. In this image, it's a father, a grandfather, grandchild, it looks like, for 3 generations. Notice what it would feel like if you were to not have any future fear. So to let go of dread and anxiety, would that be okay? Do you need the dread and anxiety in order to keep safe? Is that actually how it works? That is the underlying belief for a lot of us, is that if I don't worry about things, if I'm not trying to predict what might happen wrong, then I'm just going to be blindsided by it. Is that really true? Some perception of bringing the evidence from the past is helpful. Bringing too much of the evidence from the past and believing it's true is not helpful. Looking around and seeing all the videos and images and learning about all the suffering in the world, we want to be open hearted and connected. And if we start feeling like that's part of the evidence that we're not safe, then that's not helpful. Helpful to work with this in a deliberate way, not to deny what might happen, to look at the roots of it and then look at where we are now.